Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this Truth Bomb Riff on Wednesday, February 5th, 2025 at approximately 12:40 p.m. my time. And I'm joined by my colleague to my left on my screen, might be opposite on your screen, but the Mighty Mouse from Chicago, the truth and facts bearer, someone who never backs down to the enemies of freedom and justice for all. Her name is Roseanne Rabiola Mile underneath the Clean New Deal flag. And we are so happy to be joined by Jean, last name
Brooke,
Brooke.
Brooke
Jean,
Babineau.
Jean Brooke, who reached out to me on social media through X to basically declare that he had some ideas and was concurrent to a lot of the elements that I've been pushing out there. And what I wanted to do is an experiment in a dialogue with somebody that we've never met to kind of create a correlation that might act as potentially helpful sort of surrogate to all of you out there that might not fully understand what it is that we're attempting to do in this incredibly noisy and loud cacophony of misinformation, disinformation, and lies that have fomented what is an absolute devastation and a tragedy beyond Shakespeare's wildest imagination. And so, on that note, let's just start with why you reached out to me, Gene. What compelled you to do that?
Because you spoke the truth to power. You talked about the corruption and how it's evolved and is essentially taking over. Then the corruption starts with money and power over humanity and decency.
I love that, Gene, and that's a wonderful, wonderful place to begin. And it inspires me because I know there are millions of people out there like you. I've always known that, but it's been so difficult for us to connect directly with people like you because of this noise and the circus and bandwidth, and people don't know who to trust and where to go. And if they haven't had it served to them on a platinum platter through a resource that they trust, maybe Rachel Maddow, for example, who I have shown time and time again, isn't somebody you want to put your full faith and credit into because of things that I've revealed. Not to say that she's a bad guy, she's not. She's just part of this massive confusion. But Gene, let me revert back to what you just said, because I think that is the ultimate DNA. That is the ultimate elixir for what we're trying to foment, which we call the Clean New Deal, which is the Big Bang of truth. So let's continue with sort of your obviously you've been around, you've got wisdom, you've seen the world as it is. Why don't you give us some context as to how you could formulate a statement like that and to intuitively understand what I'm revealing was speaking to what you already knew or what would compel you to reach out to me?
Well, essentially 74 plus years on the above ground on the planet Earth and paying attention, reading. And what I have learned most is from history. And as Carlos Santillana, the philosopher, said, if we do not remember our history, we're condemned to repeat it. Carl Hegel, another philosopher, said, the one thing that humans learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. One is a negative perspective, the other has positive awareness. And through conscious awareness, we can see what happens, providing we remove the prejudices from our vision, from our minds, and we look at things openly. We're all human beings on the planet. No one is better or worse than the other. And it's about acceptance, love, and truth. Those are the real foundations for any society or any group that is going to get along and survive. And to me,
Oh
that's what's
my God.
meaningful.
I want to react to that just really quickly because I am so inspired. You just electrified me, Glenn. And what I find so inspiring about what you just said is I wouldn't be me without previous generations who embedded in me, imbued in me, many of what you had just stated. And I constantly refrain, and I know we're both in music, and you've been in music for some time. We had a brief conversation before I hit record, but one of the prophets for me is David Byrne from the Talking Heads, who proclaimed back in the 80s in my youth as I was coming into the world, basically in terms of extrapolating experience and growing, was same as it ever was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the history does repeat itself, and the mechanics of psychology and people and society if you understand history, you can certainly see patterns and you can certainly understand, what we don't want to repeat, but yet you gave us the nth degree of what tends to be this crazy satire and the tragic reality that we always repeat the same mistakes. And we're right in the middle of it. And so here I am with two people that are about the same age. Rizan Rabiola Mile is 75 years old. You're 74. And I frequently say, I know people in their 70s who have more courage and wisdom in their pinkies than 99% of who I, interact with on social media. And what are you guys doing? So on that note, I mean, again, you reached out to me. This is brilliant because the truth matters above all else. But of course, there is the existential truth, there's the philosophical truth, there's a lot of theoretical truths, but there's also truth based on evidence.
Mm-hmm.
This is our entire system. Can you kind of extrapolate some of those things and as far as who you are as a human being, and again, maybe bring that back to how you arrived at why I was worthy of somebody you would want to reach out to?
Well, one of the things that one of the same statements that comes up continually is Mohandas Gandhi, who said, "We think the enemy is hate, but it's fear. It's always been fear, and fear does it triggers hatred as a defense mechanism." And it has done this through every society. And if you look at Nazi Germany, which we're actually going through a very similar phase right now, with the loyalty oaths, things of this nature, it's all over again. In fact, there was one fellow who was a survivor of the concentration camps, and he said, Trump is exactly the same. I see exactly the same dynamics and sequences in him that I saw in Germany. And this is the 1920s. And it doesn't take a
rocket science. It
well, I
doesn't
was
take
going to
a
say
rocket
yeah,
scientist.
it
Well,
it
let me,
doesn't take a degree, to a philosophical degree or a psychiatry degree or any kind of college degree to understand the simple truth that's right in front of us.
amen. And let me offer this as another stepping off point. My shortcut has always been because the core of who I am is never again with regards to the Holocaust. The history of the world really got to a place that was infinitely worse because of technology at the time of Hitler and everything that went into it to create
Yeah.
mass extermination, right? And now we're beyond that potentially. Now, I hear people all the time compare Trump to Hitler. I would I would disagree with that statement because Trump would be, in my world, closer or more akin to a Mussolini. However,
Yeah.
Trump isn't as ambitious or off the rails. He is more off the rails just because he's just a bombastic fool and
Yes.
somebody literally a toddler, in this position. But the one thing that Trump has as a powerful tool, as he always have, and many people are recognizing now, is the befuddlement of the language of stupid, which appeals to a lot of stupid. But at the same time, it's undergirded by what I've always said is that corruption bursts and fuels fascism. Donald Trump, his entire career, has been corrupt. He should have been
Yeah.
put in jail decades ago. I interact a lot of the time with the probably foremost expert in Donald Trump, a gentleman by the name of David K. Johnston, who's
Yes.
demonstrated to me and millions of others the history of everything Trump. Now, this was long before The Apprentice. This was
Yeah.
long before, whatever the relationship was in Russia with Putin, with Trump Tower, and however that manifested, because Trump is no rocket scientist. He's no mastermind of anything. And of course, what we saw was the J6 Inquiry Commission put the onus on the insurrection on Donald Trump as the mastermind when we know that is absolutely insane. Donald Trump is surrounded by a machine
Yes.
that incorporates the Koch brothers, who are incredibly smart, and now it's all the people in the Koch enterprise over
Yeah.
4 decades of this libertarian nightmare to basically hijack the United States, which is
Yes.
what's happening in front of our face. But beyond that, Hitler, I mean, I hate to say it, he's almost like a Mel Brooks satire of himself. I mean, yesterday he says, "Hey, all Gazans need to leave, and we're going to build the most fantastic Mediterranean, glitzy, glamorous, resort in the middle of all of this nightmare tragedy of what's been going on in Gaza." He reminds me of when Mel Brooks had Hitler on Ice, or the Inquisition. I mean, but it's
Yeah.
not funny, right? Because he's surrounded by all of these entities that are very sophisticated, are very versed in history, Steve Bannon being one of them. And
Yeah.
this whole continuation of America First through MAGA to now what we're in the midst of is only made possible by corruption. And what I mean by that is the integrity of law never held Trump to account. It never made the entirety of this infrastructure of billionaires and the hostile takeover of what took
Mhm.
place way longer than this, but we put the timeline starting 14 years ago because of the information I know. But it enabled billionaires to get trillions of dollars for free to further
Yep.
double down on the corruption within our system. That now everybody, particularly on the Democratic side, is saying, oh my God, we live in an oligarchy and now we have to have this resistance. When meanwhile, their silence and their complicity enabled this billionaire apparatus to run roughshod over the entirety of the system. And what else would we expect given what you had laid out? So here's me taking over the conversation, and I don't
Yeah.
want that. I
No,
want
that's all right. What you said had a lot of have a lot of relevance and veracity. And there is a big difference between 45 and Hitler. Hitler served his country. He earned two awards for bravery under fire. 45 is a five-time draft dodger who's essentially he has lied for a living. His father was a liar, and he got that from his grandfather, who was a draft dodger.
all of which we
So I
learned
mean,
from David K.
this
Johnson,
is
by
the
the way.
heritage. This is the heritage passed down. And if you look at that, it's like okay, you get shaped by your parentage, and you get shaped by that parentage, and now we're dealing with this. Uh, and relevant to that, the one thing that he does have going for him, has always had going for, is there was a certain charisma. And he learned that as part of the real estate trade that he got into. And you pitch and you pitch and you lie and you manipulate to get your eventual payoff. And he's taken that to a fine art. People see that potential and they graft themselves a hold of it because there's a spokesman that can get me into a position of power that I can steal, manipulate, and swindle everybody for anything that I want, which is there's no limit because there's a difference. People, decent people recognize when they have enough. Empty people can never have enough. It's always about more.
That's
It's always
absolutely
about more.
That's absolutely beautiful, but
Yeah.
I want to take that psychological juxtaposition, which I think is spot on. But I
Mm.
want to imbue it with what our expertise is and what we're doing, and then I'm going to turn it over for some more questions. But again, this is organic. We're just
Sure.
talking. We just met the first time, and we're acting as kind of surrogates to people that don't know this information and yet might be, shall we say, compositely attracted to your sort of juxtaposition because you speak so eloquently and so clearly and so passionately and quite frankly so compellingly. But the never enough aspect is one side of it. Okay, when you're not held accountable by the law for your crimes and you know you can be above the law, you get twisted. So what we've seen recently in pop culture is the stories of both the mechanics of somebody who I know very well in terms of his history and everything else, and that's Harvey Weinstein and the entire Harvey Weinstein complicity machine. But I'll
Yeah.
also talk about P. Diddy in the music realm. But the correlation is what P. Diddy did. And same with Epstein and everything else. And Epstein's still this cloudy obfuscation because of his connection, quite frankly, to intelligence and big, 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 big money. We're talking about the entire financial system of the United States and the world, quite frankly. And there's a reason that all works, which ties back to Trump and the psychology that we're talking about. But the corollary is that P. Diddy literally created freak offs. So think about this. People go to a P. Diddy party because they're ambitious in music. They want to be near people that are producers. They want to be in the limelight. They want to interact, they want to network, they want to be able to be in a position to showcase their talents so that they could rise above and become the starlet they've always dreamed of being. What P. Diddy preyed upon was to create a machine just like Harvey Weinstein that would identify people who had talent. But then what he would do is he would get them in a compromised situation. He would put them in situations where they would literally get raped. They would have it on film, and it would be such an embarrassment that it could destroy their career so they could be owned by P. Diddy. Now,
Yep.
further than that, and same with Harvey Weinstein, it's the exact same thing. And the entire mechanisms of these verticals would work within that corollary to be able to manifest that because everybody played a role. Now, what was even worse about the P. Diddy situations was that he literally would gang rape people. Okay. He would break the law and then he would get people so diminished because they had been destroyed because their dream turned nightmare was in such disarray that they were then vulnerable to be able to be predated upon in a way that they were leveraged and they were controlled. And that control and that leverage enabled P. Diddy to have leverage within the record company and the
Yes.
distribution and everything else. Okay, so that's that vertical paradigm. Okay. But what he did the whole time was break the law. Now, the law didn't come down on either Weinstein or P. Diddy for decades. We
Yep.
knew all of this stuff back at the turn of the century. It's kind of funny to say that because we're in 2025, and I can't believe we're talking about these things in 2025, particularly in light of fascism, because
Right.
we've gone way beyond all of this stuff. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. This is tyranny 101. This is control. This is the edicts of what the empires of, quite frankly, the aristocracy in Europe did ad nauseum, and not to mention, the Romanovs. I mean, they all did it to a degree. When you control people through these scenarios, you have absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that's all one thing, okay? But here is the mother lode of it all. Our financial system, because God is money in our system, right? God,
I've seen the versions, and it started off with the sun, and then it became an image, and now it's converted to a dollar sign
there you go.
or whatever passes for that now. God version 6.
So, right. So, what we learned in the 17th century imperialism through a gentleman by the name of, help me out, Roseanne, with our
Bastiat.
Bastiat taught us
Yes.
in the 1700s that when a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. Okay, so this is the manifestations of power. But the big reveal, drum roll please, is that in 2009, after the great financial crisis, after millions of people were set up in a billionaire freak off by the financial system where people wanted a house, they didn't understand the system. They got involved with rolling loans and all sorts of things and flipping and yada, yada, yada that didn't match market, reality and fundamentals. And things got out of whack through what we call liar's loans. It was a setup just like P. Diddy's scenario where people
Yep.
wanted a piece of the American dream, where tens of millions of people got in the crosshairs of a financial global fraud that then
Yep.
collapsed because it wasn't sustainable. And when it collapsed, because it was all intended to do exactly what it did, instead of market forces working the way they're supposed to in our society based on capitalism, which is risk reward. And when you fundamentally fail, you fail supposedly. But instead, the full faith and credit of the United States was used to provide tens of trillions of
Yep.
dollars to the engineers of calamity that created it. And now we have a psychosis to where the billionaire class has been above the law and market forces for so long that they could be so audacious as to create one of their own. And he doesn't work alone, Elon Musk, to go behind the scenes and take over the Treasury while we purge the FBI through Donald Trump and try to make the FBI Trump's personal police
Of,
force, among other
of
things.
course. Of
So now
course.
we have corruption burns and fuels fascism in your face. So now I'm going to stop and I'm going to let you guys riff for a while
Well,
because that's what we reveal. But you've come to us, and the question
yeah.
is now, what's your response to that?
Well, take it back to 1980 with Reagan. He was the one who started with that whole trickle down piece. Essentially, Reagan was a sock bucket for billionaires, and he reversed all of the positives that were done by FDR with the Green New Deal. And that created a resilience, a strength, an economic force within the average working class person. And it's only gotten worse since then. And if you take it back to another level, you can actually take it back to George Washington at his farewell address at Mount Vernon. And he predicted, he said, at some point in time, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, unprincipled men will grab the reins of this nation and they will subvert it and they will destroy the reins that gave them power. And here we are. We're right at the cusp of that right now. And we may have gone beyond that. I don't know. But the human value is the only thing that I think can really stand up for that. And that's using your heart, using empathy instead of superiority. And that takes courage. Courage from the French word cœur, for heart. And we need to be heartfelt when we go forward, when we deal with people, regardless of whether they've got a red hat or not. That's a human being, and try and find their values. There was a brilliant person called Stephen Hassan who was inculcated into the cult of the Moonies, Sun Young Moon. And he was pulled out of that by his parents and friends, and they helped him to reacquire his conscious awareness, his ability to critically think. And he devoted himself and has since devoted himself to helping people survive culting. And in fact, he has a brilliant book that I highly recommend called The Cult of Trump. Enough said on that one.
And here I have, okay, Patrick and I have been working together for about going on 5 years. Mm-hmm. I finally have in front of me a boomer, a male boomer who understands how we're all connected, who understands how we all have to operate in good faith, how we understand we're all people. We all go to the bathroom the same way. Minus I know about the physical stuff, but you know what I'm saying. Everybody does it the same frickin' way. Okay? I always say that. What drew me to Patrick, I understood from the time I was about 10 years old, because I lived in Chicago a few blocks from Mayor Daley. I understood what the bad guys were always doing. So that was always front and center. I knew the law didn't apply to them. Nothing applied to them. They did exactly what they wanted to do. I was just the opposite. My father was more of an influence on my life than my mother was, because he saw individuals. He went out and helped individuals. My whole life has been and continues to be, I say I share two things: facts, what I have learned from Patrick and his work, and what I know about the economic system. I share the facts and I share food. And anybody who wants to tell me or set up rules that say, oh, you can't give these people this, or we're going to lock you out of the park, guess what? I find another way. And that's what I've done my entire life. And I'm still in arguments and fights, but to see you, a guy I see women who, yeah, they agree with me. Okay. But I'm not seeing the boomer guys. Where are the guys who were in the street with me? Do they forget what it was like to sit with 100,000 people? Do they forget? Do they forget what were we trying to do? What were we trying to do? I remember the Saturday Night Massacre. Where is that today? What do we do to bring them in? That's what I look for every day. Every day, every day. And I tell Patrick all the time, Patrick, there ain't no magic words and there's no magic time. Certain words are going to hit these people, certain words are going to hit other people. And the longer you wait, guess what? The closer you get to the result. It's okay to wait. We can do it. Eh, I'm going on. Just keep doing it. Don't stop. Don't be silent. You're not silent. How do we get them to speak up? How do we grab them?
Let me ask a question to Glenn, and just in terms of the interaction, and that was beautiful, Roseanne, as always. Roseanne is an incredible mentor to me, but I mean, a partner, but also inspiration because of where she comes from. But and she encapsulated that brilliantly. But she analytically understands a lot of things that are incredibly compositely oriented from problem to solution, problem to solution, problem to solution. And what we have right now is a befuddlement among people who speak our language, who are humanists, who like to see people thrive, want to see dynamism in the law work so that great people can do great things. But at the same time, we have a safety net and we try to help those that fall through the cracks and maybe reform. And I mean, there's always solutions to problems, but we're in the midst of something that's so catastrophic and it's such a repeat of our history that it's just ridiculous. But I got to ask you, Glenn, can you tell me what you have heard from us and what your orientation is in terms of social media and what you might add to that in terms of who you are and what you would like to serve a role in this sort of movement to try to galvanize people to get to a place where we can overcome the corruption of fascism. We recognize that right now as something that joins us all. Can you tell us what you're hearing and what you're not hearing?
The simple thing for me is your basic act of human kindness, one by one, because that pays outwards, it pays forward. And every time you deal with a stranger you met in the shopping center or a cashier, and you give that moment of kindness, compassion, and I really appreciate what you do. Thank you. And I hope everyone treats you with kindness and courtesy. You've just made that person's day a lot brighter. And that passes along to the next person and the next person. And that's one of the very simple things that we can do. The other thing is to read history. Because if you, as I say, if you do not understand your history, you are condemned to repeat it. That's the other thing. Pay attention and don't get locked into biases. Well, it has to be this because if you invent a reason for something, then you're going to come up with reasons not to do it. And instead of being fearful, look at the solutions. One of my favorite references is Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. And he said, when I was a child, I used to get scared by the things I saw in the news. And my mother would tell me, always look for the helpers. Well, be a helper. Be someone who goes out of their way. Those little random acts of kindness. That's what shapes a society. And if we shape the society out of love and compassion and kindness, what are we going to bring to ourselves? Exactly what we put out.
I love that, and I'm with you on that all the way. But understand who I am also. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a punk rock generation. I played football, meaning I slam danced. Okay, I don't know if you remember that era, but I was one of those
Yeah.
guys who would fly off the stage into the crowd, and I was one of those crazy dudes. I've been an extreme sports athlete much of my life. I've played football for much of my life, rugby. I'm not afraid of physical challenges. Never have been. Okay, so I don't get intimidated by bullies. I never have gotten intimidated by bullies. I prefer to hang out with a whole bunch of people at a Grateful Dead show and kumbaya. Trust me, I've done that too, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, so I have a lot of different dimensions of my spirit and my personality, and here we are together. But I also know that a drum circle and kumbaya is not going to defeat the iron grip of fascism and complicity and corruption. That's usually why we have revolutions, right? And so ultimately, like for example, Bernie Sanders is somebody that I was akin to from the very beginning. However, and my journey started in 2009, and it's never changed. But yesterday, on the floor of the House, Bernie Sanders gave this very inspiring and compelling speech that basically addressed, this incredible, you know, um, uh, crisis on our hands.
He
But
did.
but here's the thing: he's been doing it for 14 years. He said
Yes.
the exact same thing on the floor of the House in
Yeah.
2011 that I put in my first documentary film, Forward 13 Waking Up the American Dream, in which nothing's changed. Now, this is my criticism of Bernie, and it's a respectful criticism, but it's going to imbue, and I want to get your reaction to this, and I want to have Roseanne chime in with what our precepts and our direction is, and I'll be able to set that up. But I want to hear from you because this is the first time we're talking,
Right.
how you're responding to this, because ultimately I'm not professing a bloody revolution. Okay, I'm not. I know that we will lose that because we do not have the guns and we
No.
don't have the ability to overcome the police force. Honestly, I think everybody in our military and our police force and at the FBI who is bending the knee to Donald Trump right now is a traitor. They're a traitor to the commitments that they made when they put the badge on, when they were hired, or when they pursued their service. Because we all
Rule
know,
of law.
yeah, we all know that law enforcement in our military is to serve the Constitution, not
Yes.
a freaking autocrat or a dictator. This is absolutely absurd. But what we
Hmm.
have under the covers is a Christo national fascist that also imbues this whole thing of incels, which are these young men who really kind of fallen off of the dating thing because of technology. The entire system of society has been turned upside down and inside out because of technology. But to pull the point together further, Bernie Sanders speaks in platitudes. I love him. I respect him. I love what he's done.
Right.
But he does not give us the details. And this is the ultimate
Yep.
encapsulation. When he was debating Hillary Rodham Clinton in the 2016 election, where he probably was going to win the presidency if he didn't get subsumed and betrayed by the DNC, and ultimately we gave the election to Donald Trump, who was involved with all sorts of stuff that was just a test run with Russia and Prigozhin and the Mercers and all of those guys behind the scenes and Steve Bannon that would lead to 2020 and everything that ultimately brought us 2025, right? This has been a long haul. But when Bernie Sanders had the opportunity, he had said in a
Yeah.
debate with Hillary Rodham Clinton that Wall Street's business model is fraud. There was never any follow up. There was never any deep dive. Bernie
Yep.
never went any further to create the investigation and the discovery that not just told people what happened, but why it was illegal and why the federal government failed to hold the CEOs on Wall Street to
Yep.
account, to where every single one of them went to prison and had their entire looting apparatus of their billion-dollar fortunes yanked out of their stealing hands,
Yep.
which is what would happen in a nation where the law is supreme. So the
Exactly.
question is, people, what don't you get? We just had Lawrence O'Donnell yesterday say that the law no longer works. The
Yeah.
law didn't work for the last 14 years, and everybody in power has been subservient to playing by the corrupt's rules. So before we go forward, I want to see how you respond to that from where I'm coming from in this really interesting dialogue.
Well, consider what you said is absolutely valid. There wasn't a single blank fine or any of the other manipulators that caused the '08 crash held accountable. But look at the protesters who were jailed, and they were peacefully protesting against the subversion and the abuse of the economic society of our country.
Are you referring to Occupy Wall Street, by the way?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I was a part of that. That was my first movie. Yes, I was right in the middle of all that. Yep. Go ahead.
Well done. Well, look,
I did 32 in
you just
Canada
earned
around the
another
country.
level of respect from me on that. But no, seriously, and that kind of accountability, the rule of law, is something that has gone back to the founding fathers, and that has to be the single purpose. That has to be the responsibility. That has to be what everyone invests their faith and belief in and supports. And if that isn't done, then this society is not going to survive.
That's fascism. That's what fascism is. If you don't
Yeah.
have the balance of power, okay, or tyranny, or aristocracy, or oligarchy, or the Politburo, they're all the same thing in different
Yes.
manifestations. So let me ask you this question before I turn it over to Roseanne to bring us out of this and to close this. What would you prescribe as the solution, even though you just did, but with a little bit more detail, because I want to see how you would set the table in context of what it is that we're doing, and I want to see how you react to it. But before we tell you what our precepts are and what our solutions are, what do you think are the solutions from where you're sitting at the moment?
Well, one of the points is that you suggested earlier, and one of the biggest problems is the electoral college. And there's a brilliant book written by Thomas Hartman, and it has the war on voting, and it does have a couple of very succinct and elegant points in how to do it. The strategies are there. It's a complex book, but it's very short. But you really have to think as you read, and
I was
thinking
a guest on Tom
is a big
Hartman.
part of it.
I was a guest on Tom Hartman right after the my first film, which was Occupy Wall
Yeah.
Street, which is the whole thing. That was my prologue to get
Right.
into this. So that's fantastic. Okay, so electoral college is one. Anything
Yeah.
else come to mind?
Quite frankly, other than just dealing with people one on one, shining the light of truth on the lies when we see it. One of the biggest problems right now, and this actually goes back to Joseph Goebbels, and he said, if I can control the media, I can turn a population into a herd of pigs. And that's happening. And the proliferance of media right now with the misinformation, disinformation that's being propagated, that is the biggest problem right now because people are being inculcated, pardon, indoctrinated, infused with all of these lies. And it becomes this like, what do I believe now? And
They're being herded
exactly.
like herd animals. That's what this
Yes.
thing is all about. And if you don't have independence and understand and
Yeah.
query critical thought, you are a herd animal. So to
Yeah.
all those listening, we know we can't reach 100% of you, and those who
Yeah.
can't see the forest for the trees or understand the light are herd animals. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry that
Try and breathe. Try and breathe when you're being held underwater. Good luck. And it's that flow, that flood of lies and manipulations that causes people to be, oh, I can't breathe anymore. And that's what we're dealing with.
So when you hear
So
me say I've got the truth, how does that reign with you? Because I get people all the time like, "Oh, hey, if I believe," because I say it and I proclaim it boldly, and trust
yeah,
me, I understand the difference between philosophy and psychology, and I understand history, and I understand propaganda,
yes,
and I understand, but I proclaim because nobody can hear anything else. But they certainly want to ridicule me when they hear me say, and a lot of this is recently. They want to kill the messenger when I say I've got the truth that nobody else will tell you. And I had one.
one
Go ahead.
one name comes to mind that if you're not aware, check it out. Heather Cox Richardson.
I read her.
That is significant.
Well, she
That
doesn't hear
is
me. She doesn't hear me right now, but that's what we're trying to get there. So let me turn this
yes.
over to you, Roseanne, because you just heard what Glenn said. So where does your mind go? But I would like you to try to consider, please, the precepts. Well, based on the four questions, and of course our precepts.
Okay, my first thing is always cut off the money. Okay, how do you cut off the money? We've been pumping trillions illegally to the criminals in suits with no shame via Federal Reserve Act 13.3. Most people do not even know what Federal Reserve Act 13.3 is. They give kudos to Obama and Mr. Paulson and Mr. Bernanke. They saved us. and they allowed the criminals to go free and gave them the fuel with which to do it. So what we got to do is we got to recreate a modern day Glass-Steagall that Mr. Clinton, who I did not vote for, took away. Oh, we need to be more modern. Okay, fuck you. What are you, nuts? Okay, anyway, we got to do that. And at the time,
Wait. While you're doing that, let me just give this caveat real quick. Okay, so what she's talking about with the new Glass-Steagall for younger people who are watching this. After the Great Depression, we had Carter Glass and the Senator Steagall and Glass came together to create this law and regulation that gave us the Securities and Exchange Commission that
No.
were the police for finance. Okay, and because you have to have finance, I mean police on finance, because if you don't have that, you have racketeering and criminality. That's the difference between capitalism and the mafia is the law first and foremost. But what we learned at that time period with the SEC and everything else was also you can't, and this is the caveat to the whole thing with the new Glass-Steagall, you can't provide the full faith and credit of the United States to criminal racketeering without holding the bad guys to account. You can't let them play with other people's money to where they crash the world based on crime, and then we give them tens of trillions of dollars doing that. In what world would that make sense? Well, the one we're living in. So please
Yes.
continue.
and you want to talk about heritage, Ferdinand Pecora, who was the prosecutor, who was the one who questioned and interrogated, I call them the big boys, in the 1930s, was actually born in the same village that my maternal grandparents and great grandparents come from, in Sicily. And I didn't know that until, I don't know, I read the book about Ferdinand Pecora, but here he is, the Sicilian guy, and some of his blood's running over here because I'm like 89% Sicilian, okay, from the same village. We need, and I think, see, Patrick doesn't have like this agenda where he wants to be, I call it the big cheese. He don't want to be the big cheese. He doesn't have to be the top banana, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Why are we here? We're here. I'm here to make a better place, to save the planet, to save the people, to have them thrive, not merely survive. So, if you can create a new Glass-Steagall, a modern day Glass-Steagall, and if you can end the frickin' Citizens United, which all
No.
that, what's Citizens United? Make corporations, people. Screw you. What are you, nuts? What kind of idiot person
It's
would,
dark money, so they can have a freak off on the law and market forces, just like P.
Yep.
Diddy people.
There's no limitation on the amount of funds that a corporation could put out, providing they're a person. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg said the same thing. If there's one thing I would do, it would be to undo Citizens United. I
and
agree.
that's right. But we have, people will say that. People will say that, but they will not take this much time or this much time or this much time to understand what it is that's screwing us, that's screwing them, why they lost their house, why they're buried in credit card debt. They think, oh no, this is too complicated and somebody else is gonna fix it. No, man, nobody else is gonna fix shit for you. You have to go out and you got to do it. And you know what? I can show you, and Patrick can show you how that $71 trillion that these criminals got can be better spent. I can show you about a federal job guarantee that can allow people to work on transforming the whole grid and doing all the jobs connected with getting us off of fossil fuel, and they don't have to move. They don't have to go to San Francisco or the Bronx to get a job. You stay where you are. You use your talents where you are. None of this UBI crap. Oh, we'll give everybody $1,000. What is that going to do? It's going to raise prices $1,000. So where are you at? You're at the same damn place. Okay, a lot of things we could
Let,
do.
let me let me just fill in the blanks real quick about what she just said, which is extremely important because you're definitely doing the precepts beautiful with the animation, Roseanne. But the clarity of the $71 trillion is, where does that money come from? So everybody's always asking, where's the money come from? But then out of their same breath, they're like, okay, but we got $33 trillion in government debt. Oh, we've got $33 trillion in credit card debt. Oh, wait a second. Now Donald Trump with his new Secretary of the Treasury, who is this billionaire hedge fund guy who just gave Elon the keys to the freaking kingdom, which is the nuclear secrets
Yeah.
of the payment system, right? Which is a hijacking of this like monstrosity that could turn off payments to millions of people on Medicare and Medicaid and then USAID around the world. And of course, all these guys are saying that that's a CIA play, which maybe in some cases it might be. In many cases, it's not, because women are whatever. I could go on and on and on. But the bottom line is, what the biggest confusion is what brought Roseanne and I together, because she was working as an activist with an operation that stems from what's known as modern monetary theory, which is just a descriptive sort of academia that gives us an understanding of how we finance government. We're a sovereign currency, okay? We're the world's global reserve currency, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and we could talk about that for hours and hours. But what we're demonstrating is that MMT is the correct and exact description of how we finance our government. But what MMT doesn't say, and what Roseanne and I discovered because of my work in the con, is that we have created MMT for criminals. So in the aftermath of the 2008 great financial crisis, we didn't use TARP, which was the Troubled Assets Relief Program, to provide $700 billion in liquidity to get markets revving again. That was a smoke and mirrors effect that came through Congress, which is supposed to have the power of the purse, which of course Lawrence O'Donnell and Rachel Maddow and everybody else is like, oh my God, that's how we do things. And so you can't come in with presidential decree and just automatically cut off the payment systems. And you can't automatically give an unelected guy the ability to control the payment systems, all of which are true because he's breaking the law left and right. But as we've seen, who's going to stop him? Because of what I'm telling you. Because basically, the misuse of Federal Reserve Act 13.3 in 2009, which perpetuated through the following three administrations. It happened before COVID with a huge run. It happened during COVID. It happened, but the stuff during COVID was necessary, but then it led to PPP fraud. And then there was stuff that happened with all the bank blowouts last year that Biden bailed out using the exact same structure. But what we're trying to tell you is that we can forensically audit, and we have it wasn't $700 billion in emergency exigent lending from Congress. It was through the Federal Reserve backdoored illegally to guarantee the full faith and credit of the United States for racketeering to the tune of, in 2009, $33 trillion, and then another $16 trillion by 2016 in quantitative easing. And then we had $22 trillion in 2019 for a repo run out of SoftBank in Japan, which is part of this whole thing. And then ultimately, that's $71 trillion before COVID. That's auditable. So the question that America has to understand is, A, you're a sovereign currency. You can print as much money as you want into existence, first and foremost. MMT says that you need 535 members of Congress to be on the same page for the American people. But Congress is on the same page for the billionaires that are looting the Federal Reserve, and they've spent. And so the question becomes, in this precept of the Clean New Deal, we can demonstrate how $71 trillion was stolen for probably, let's call it 300,000-ish people on Wall Street, and then the billionaire apparatuses. That's not an entire country of 340 million people. And given all of the problems that we have, from systemic prisons, racism in prisons, to this authoritative state, to climate change, to works projects, and all of it, it's so stupid, people. It's so stupid. It's beyond comprehension. We created MMT for criminals that the DOJ and the FBI and the SEC did not hold accountable. And when you understand that money isn't the issue, it's the law. It's
Mhm.
the law is her point. So to recap and to launch in the next four precepts, and then we'll conclude this. But Roseanne, you introduced obviously a new Glass-Steagall that we have to. The second point was to get rid of Citizens United. You introduced how we have to demonstrate how $71 trillion was looted out of existence from the public purse. And now what happens next?
Supreme Court, let's expand it to maybe like 13 justices. But the big thing is we have to enforce a canon of ethics to make the perpetrators accountable. We know all the shit they're doing. Anybody doing anything? No, let's give them some more money. Let's pat them on the head. Nice guys. Oh, we're going to make you feel even better. Okay? Then what kind of people are these? What kind of world do we live in? We live in a crazy world. We live in a crazy world. But you know what?
We live in a
Nothing,
corrupt world.
yeah, nothing surprises me. Nothing. Okay. Nothing. And I just say, yeah, more of the craziness. But the other thing, and this was a big thing in the 60s and 70s, we got to end qualified immunity. You know, what did Daley say? He tells the cops in 68, go shoot to kill. He tells the Chicago cops, go shoot to kill my friends. Go shoot to kill my friends that are going to go to frickin' Vietnam for you. Okay, shoot to kill. That ain't happening, but it's okay.
It puts
Cops,
the police above the law.
yeah, okay. And now we got wackos who were against the police, who were killing police, who were hurting police, who were injuring police.
Insurrectionist.
They're okay. They're okay. We're
They're
gonna and at least chubby guy Pritzker in Illinois said, none of these, none of these criminals, none of these insurrectionists are gonna get a job in my state. Good for you,
oh,
Pritzker. Good for you. Then, of course, presidential immunity. Do we even have to talk about that? What kind of shit is this? We thought Nixon was so terrible, okay? Nixon and Rosemary Woods got nothing on these idiots. Okay. Rosemary does exactly what Nixon says because Nixon thinks he can do everything. See, Nixon was smart. He didn't write shit down. Okay. He might have said stuff. Well, anybody can deny what I said to you, what you said to me. When you write it down, when you have it memorialized, it ain't going nowhere. So he has her, oh, it's a mistake. We'll destroy 18 minutes on this tape. Screw you, Nixon. I don't even want to know where you're at right now in the afterworld. And then we got to end the electoral
Wait,
college.
let me just chime in on the presidential immunity bit there, though, because look, people, America, and I know you know this, Glenn. The fact of the matter is, the Supreme Court etch a sketched the history of the United States in one fell swoop. They etch a sketch the 14th Amendment, Section 3, that says clearly, and anybody who has a high school education can read it, if you participate in an insurrection, you cannot run for office of the United States,
oh,
let alone the chief executive office. But yet they just crowned a king. of which, of course, let's remind everybody that Neville Chamberlain, Joe Biden, decided not to use that power to be able to wage war on SCOTUS and also Elon Musk when he had the chance. He left it all to fate. And then at the end, he says, oh, hey, by the way, we have an oligarchy now, and it's up to you, the people, to be able to remedy this, like we did with the trust busting and the New Deal. Okay, well, that's what we're doing. But at the same time, thanks, Joe. You had the power of the presidency. You could have actually, used the bully pulpit to hold these guys accountable and wage, a principled, quite frankly, war against corruption. But you didn't, because you were kowtowing to the system that was going to send you off. And I guess Joe, just by the way, got an agent yesterday, just so you guys know. But anyway, that being said, so to remind everybody where we are in the dialogue. You get a new Glass-Steagall. You get rid of Citizens United. We demonstrate $71 trillion that was looted that we can use to rebuild and redeem the dream. And then ultimately, you got to get rid of qualified immunity. The police have to be accountable. They can't shoot to kill, because now you've got an authoritarian state. You can't have judicial immunity. You have to have the justices under the same law everybody else is, because if they're above the law, that doesn't mean we have the supremacy of law, obviously. And then, of course, presidential immunity, that gives us a king, which leads us to your next precept.
Well, and also the Constitution that said all men are created equal.
That's right.
So how can you overturn that and still have a nation under law?
You can't, but unless everybody complies. And that's what we're trying to get people not to comply. So, Roseanne, what's the final precept? It's actually, go ahead and close this out.
Well, the last one, after ending qualified immunity, ending presidential immunity, we end the Electoral College. Okay. Now, how can anybody disagree with the simple things? We didn't mention political parties or anything. How can anybody who thinks or doesn't have plastic covers on their brain disagree with those precepts? How can they not?
Let me just introduce the Electoral College is a perversion of democracy. It's ruled by the minority, especially when you add up Citizens United and you add up what we just saw in the 2020 election, where Trump tried to create an elector scheme to create falsification of electoral signatures to steal the Electoral College. That's just complete manipulation that nobody tried to stop. The only person who figured that one out was Rachel Maddow, by the way. Kudos to her. And that created 11 criminal referrals that ultimately went to Jack Smith, that he was never able to get that over the finish line, because we have a corrupt judge by the name of Eileen Cannon who prevented it all from the law from taking shape. Now, the Electoral College is a perversion, because you can have an ungodly amount of billionaires in the state of Wyoming who have more legislative power than the entire state of California. This is, again, smoke and mirrors. What we're illustrating to the American people is that their instincts are right, that we don't have a law, we don't have an economy based on free markets or what we call risk reward, where creative destruction happens, because we have what's known as moral hazard, which gives the bad guys who destroyed everybody the full faith and credit of the United States. And on top of it, we made it such that the cops, the judges, and the president are above the law. All of that being equal equals the big T, tyranny.
Now factor in gerrymandering, and you've got another aspect.
There you go. And so at the end of this day, what I'm revealing to you is the perverse inverse, that Donald Trump is a red carpet reflection of the emperor's new clothes, so that you can see the forest through the trees. That goes for everyone. But more importantly, we've just basically water hosed you with a lot of information. But you're a very smart guy, and I'm curious what your reaction to that is.
There are so many different factors. The electoral process, exactly, and allowing states to redistrict according to biases to determine who's actually going to be representing the people when they're actually representing a minority. It doesn't make any sense. And the whole fact that, as you mentioned earlier, the number of voters in California outweigh how many other states? And yet it only comes down to one vote per state. So perhaps instead of having it per state, there should have a unanimous voter and it's regulated by the number of people that vote, period. That simplifies.
The two other points that I'll add that Biden said recently that I agree with to the precepts of our Clean New Deal is we got to end insider trading in Congress. That's absolutely ridiculous. And then we also have to have term limits. Okay, you put
Yep.
all that together, you have a functioning democracy where you can have separation of powers. That's what we're professing in what we call the Clean New Deal. So the question, Glenn, is that something that you can champion?
Definitely.
Okay, is there anything you see any holes in our composite argument that would make you go, I don't think that actually makes sense?
No, not whatsoever. It's logic, pure and
Okay,
simple.
so the question is, now that you have a an understanding of the issues, even though you always have, but once you delve in, and I would recommend everybody to do it. My work, The Con, at the www.thecon.tv is free
Mm-hmm.
because
Yes.
all the American people buy our lies. And I can assure you, my friends, it wasn't free to make.
Yes.
It cost us millions of dollars.
It
And we were,
shows.
thank you very much. And we were able to put together the composite of what the $90 billion apparatus of our government didn't do on behalf of the American people. We did. I
Yep.
do. That's why my name is Patrick Lovell, and that's why I have the truth that nobody else will give you, because the entirety of the system collapsed to make sure you don't understand how this whole thing works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't put myself above anybody else. I am not a savior. The truth is the savior. And so when I say the composite truth is the blueprint of the con, and there's much more information that we have that is just imbued in our television series, but we've created this platform, Glenn, called the Clean New Deal that everybody can discover at www.thecleannewdeal.org. That not only
Mm-hmm.
presents everything that we've just discussed in this dialogue with our friend, and I am so grateful for your engagement, Glenn. This is so incredibly important to us. But I want everybody to understand, including yourself, Glenn, that I put in through what we call white papers, which is just in a tab that you can find at the top of the Clean New Deal, which incidentally is Patrick Lovell presents the Clean New Deal because Roseanne demanded that. She wanted me because nobody else is speaking to all of these elements because they don't have all of the information. She said it's got to come from one source because otherwise they won't listen. So they can try to diminish me, they can try to distract me, or they can be like, hopefully, you, Glenn, where millions of us go, this guy's not lying to us. He's telling us what nobody else is because in these, what we call white papers, we've got all the evidence. I've got not just the methodology, but I've got the interviews, I've got the papers, I've got the abstracts, and I've got the
Mm-hmm.
all of the site material that gives you everything I'm telling you at an academic level. So if you're a journalist out there from the New York Times, and by the way, I've worked with New York Times journalists all the time. I work with guys at ProPublica, that the lead editor of ProPublica.
Yes.
I'm involved with the highest of the high. That doesn't make me high,
No.
but my professionalism has always been at that level, people. But you can't hear me because we got quashed by the system that controls everything. And many of you have heard the name BlackRock. They're the primary reason we got quashed. And so this is the final thing I'll say to you, Glenn, and then I want you to take us with your own conclusions. So when we saw the indictments of Donald Trump in the 33 convictions, felony convictions, the way that,
34.
yep, well, in New York, right, exactly. Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, laid out the case that got 33. Well, no, it was 33 criminal convictions, felony convictions. But what he did was the sum total of demonstrating that Donald Trump falsified business records,
Mm-hmm.
these undermined, griftopia apparatuses to lie, deceive the voters of New York in a situation where his complicit racketeering was from the silly David Pecker and the National Enquirer who quashed Stormy Daniels' story. Okay. That's the sum total of what that 33 convictions were. BlackRock quashed Patrick Lovell because BlackRock was the administrator of the 33 trillion plus dollars that
Mm-hmm.
came from the federal government through Federal Act, Reserve Act 13.3 to control the world. They're the largest asset manager on the planet. They've got the power of most countries. but they are the power of the United States. So hopefully, this is now beginning to seep through your conscience when we're providing you something that is tens of times the magnitude of Watergate and has
Mm-hmm.
created the freaking fascism that we're in the midst of. So, in closing, tell us, how you're marinating on everything that we said, and what might be your next steps.
Well, to recommend people read history is one of the main things. Fellow Maximilien Robespierre, and he was referring to the French Revolution, talked about the ability to limit people's intelligence, limit their knowledge, not educate people, made them complicit, made them compliant. And we're dealing with the same thing. The present administration, one of their key factors is to destroy the Department of Education and leave it up to the states to manipulate. Now, these are the same states that involve themselves in gerrymandering. What kind of education is going to come out of that? And what kind of population? If you turn a population into a herd of pigs, guess what? You're making a lot of hot dogs.
That's right. That's right. Pigs to slaughter. But again, to recalibrate the question, because I loved where you went with that, because it's very informative to me.
Yeah.
Because your history is exactly right. Those
Yes.
who don't understand history are bound to repeat it. But did the light go off on your head that Patrick Lovell and Roseanne Rabiola Mele just revealed to me the sum total of what we're in the midst of, with a path forward based on our history?
I would not have reached out to you had I not been inspired by what you spoke. And you spoke truth. Very simple. And there is a lot of complexity that can be very difficult for people to comprehend, especially when they're tapped into the Fox News or the other manipulative circus events, if you will. And if you look at the history of Fox News with Ronald Reagan, he undid the Fairness Doctrine, which required news agencies to present the truth. And if they were only presenting an opinion, they had to provide an equal opportunity for the alternative opinion. That was suddenly vanished under his watch. And that was where Rupert Murdoch came in.
Yeah.
And that's Fox News. And if this is your source of information and you're so busy getting along with life and you just turn on the TV for a distraction, well, guess what? You benefit from that with suppression, with ignorance, and with economic destruction. And this is where we're going. And it requires a certain amount of strength and resilience to go hold it. It isn't just about relaxing and entertainment. I need to focus on what's happening here, because it's not just me. It's my children, and my children's children are going to be the heirs of this. One of the Native American concepts says we do not inherit the future from our children. We borrow it, pardon me, from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. And if you look at the life and you look at the earth and you look at where we're at right now, you have to think about what the future is going to be. And it isn't just about ourselves or self.
I am so grateful and inspired by that. Let me finish with just this last piece to continue that thought. Look, X, where we're at, is an unnecessary evil. Okay, but look, it's all propaganda. Joseph Goebbels would have been mind blown by what Elon Musk and his behind the scenes people that represent the Saudi sovereign wealth fund, which is religious theocracy, the billionaire hedge funds, the private equity guys, as well as a couple of billionaire autocrats or I should say kleptocrats from Russia, were all involved with this, with Elon Musk, who I call Spectre, for those of you who know James Bond and the villain character who controlled the world. And that's exactly who he is. But it is a DEFCON 5 national security threat that, of course, the Biden administration chose not to actually engage. And the question is, why might not you realize now? This on the other side of yesterday, and the day before, Donald Trump is now waging further escalation of war through all sorts of lawsuits based on uh, what's it called? When you lie about someone's reputation based on it'll come to me in just a second. It's part of the whole free speech, rhetorical nature of this whole stuff. But he's suing massive media companies for being liable, right, to Donald Trump, the ultimate liar. So the grifter Donald Trump, whose entire methodology is to lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate, he is now projecting this force that this chameleon billionaire run apparatus of media to become state run media, just like, quite frankly, what they have in Russia under Putin. Okay.
Right.
That's, or Orban, by the way, and that's the direction that we're going. Now, what I've been trying to tell you people, as long as I've had a microphone and an ability to broadcast after we got quashed when we released my work, The Kind, is that media has been complicit in hiding the information that I'm telling you. I love Rachel Maddow. I love Lawrence O'Donnell. They're great people that know how to basically deconstruct Donald Trump. And they didn't defeat him.
And Robert Reich is another voice for truth.
True, but none of them defeated. They all focused entirely on Trump, and they couldn't beat him. And what I am revealing to you is tens of thousands of actors in the system that created tens of millions of felonies that led to tens of trillions of dollars. So the question that you have to ask yourself, America, and people in the world out there, do you want truth, or do you want to live in the rotting, festering, dying carcass of the dead, bloated whale of the American dream? When you have the truth, and this is my final statement on this, when you have the truth, you live in light. This is the universal construct, people, because you have to understand that light overcomes the force of darkness with the energy of the supernova. That's the universal construct. So when you live in truth, you live in light. When you live a lie, you're depraved. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. When you live a lie, inside you die. When you become a nuclear force reactor to the truth, you become the light. Pick a side.
And simplify it down into small language for people to understand easily. If you really wanted to point a finger at someone, 4 years, Merrick Garland did what? Exactly. Should have been held accountable. January 7th, 45 should have been taken from office in handcuffs. Bottom line.
And why didn't he?
Good question.
Corruption, fear, but corruption bursts and fuels fascism. What are we in the midst of, my friends?
Here we are.
Okay, so from what I understand from this dialogue is you support the Clean New Deal, you support what we're doing, and you're going to help us get the word out there. And we encourage all of you out there who have watched this to please share this with everyone you know. Please engage us. We welcome all sorts of commentary. We welcome where you're coming from. We welcome questions and anything we can help resolve in your mind. But we have to build a mass movement immediately. And we've got the answers that can bulldoze the misery of tyranny to unleash the renaissance of possibility. That's all I got. Thank you for joining us, Glenn. Thank you. Roseanne, go ahead. You got something.
No, I was going to say Saturday, February the 8th at 1 o'clock, we're taken to the streets in front of the Trump building. Because I'm
Las Vegas.
I'm in Boulder City, right close to Las Vegas. So I'm inviting everybody I can, and the people in my little town will be very upset with me. And you know what? That's okay, because sticks and stones can break my bones and names can never hurt me.
Roseanne lives in Trump country, but she's going to rally with all the people who are anti-Trump at Trump's building in Las Vegas. That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. All right. Every bit helps. And guys, thank you so much for listening. From the bottom of my heart, Glenn, thank you for reaching out Please let me know if there's anything we can provide you in the future, and we hope we can continue on this path together. Because as far as I'm concerned, man, the Red Sea is open, but it's not going to be open for long. This is an exodus from corruption, people. You join us or you drown. That's just how it's going to go. So thank you guys. Onwards and upwards. All the best.